So I'm going to talk a little bit about protecting your personal data. I really love it when people give me such a broad, sort of ambiguous topic because it means I can stand up and talk about whatever it is I want to talk about. And it turns out that last month, was National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. And our key talking points for that month were passwords, data on devices, and social media. And that's what I'm going to talk about today as well. I'm going to go ahead and extend it through this presentation. So, passwords. Let's talk a little bit about how computers store passwords. Most people probably don't need to understand this, but as technologists, people in technology, understanding how computers are actually storing passwords and then how hackers try to get at those passwords or leverage the password information is kind of useful. So, how many people think passwords are encrypted? Answers on the screen, don't raise your hand. So, passwords are not encrypted. Encryption implies a bidirectional strategy for storing information. So I can encrypt it and then I have some method for unencrypting it, going from the encrypted piece back to the unencrypted piece. Passwords are hashed. They are not encrypted. And so when I say hashed, what I mean is there are a few different hashing methods. There are bunches of different hashing methods. Two of them that I have up on here are MD5 and SHA-256. So if you have a phrase, password, and you create an MD5 hash of the phrase password, the MD5 hash is this 2867555 FAD0 yada yada yada, lots of numbers and letters. There is no way to go from 286755 etc. back to password. It's one directional. I liken it to a burning toast. You have this fresh piece of toast, you put it in the toaster, you burn it. There's no way to take that burnt toast and put it back to an original piece of bread. It's the way hashes work. Again, unidirectional. So what do hackers do with passwords? One thing that they do with them, and when I say what do they do with them, it is not uncommon for hackers to break into a website or onto a server and get a list of usernames and passwords. Then they sometimes try to figure out what to do with those passwords, particularly if they've broken into a website. They might be trying to get access to places where this user has used the password somewhere else. So they break into Facebook, they grab the Facebook password. Well, maybe that's the same password they used at LinkedIn, or maybe that's the same password they used on their email account. And you can start looking at getting more information, getting more access to this individual based on that. So when you brute force a password, let's talk about what brute forcing is. Brute forcing is starting with A, then trying B, and then trying C, and sending it through this one-way hash that we just talked about, this MD5 or SHA-256 hash, and seeing if the hashes are the same. Because every time you send it through that one-way hash, it's always going to result in the same hash. So A will always result in a hash. B will always result in a different hash. Password will always result in a hash. I just showed it to you right here. Every time you hash password, it's going to end up with that. Every time. So if you start with A, then go to B, then go to C, then go to D, it'll take about 0.71 days to figure out an 8-character lowercase password. That's on average. And so how did I come up with that number? There are 26 characters in the lowercase alphabet, A through Z. There are 8 total characters here, so up to the 8th power, 26 times 26 times 26, etc. Divide that by 2 because you don't have to go through the entire dictionary every single time you're cracking a password. On average, and the math guy is going to get me here, but on average you can cut it in about half, reasonably. Most of your common systems these days, they're used for password cracking. Even a very modest one can hash 18 million passwords a second. That's a lot. And then let's divide that by 86,400, which is the number of seconds in a day. So 0.71 days. In information security and in IT in general, 0.71 days wasn't good enough. And so we've said, let's add some complexity to it. We're going to start putting numbers. We're going to require you to have a lowercase digit and a number in your password. Okay, well, we just bumped to 9.6 days. That added an order of magnitude. And the math is 36 to the 8 divided by 2. I'm not going to keep putting all that in there. But well, 9.6 days wasn't enough either, so we're going to add capitalization to it. Well, now we have a 62-character possible password, or 62 characters that are possible to find in the password, uppercase, lowercase, and 10 digits. That still wasn't good enough. Okay, let's start adding special characters. Again, We've significantly increased the complexity of the password, right? So password crackers are going to have difficulty getting to this in a reasonable amount of time. What have we also done? We've made it almost impossible for people to remember their passwords, right? I mean, so computers can still break this in a reasonably fast amount of time, because if you think they've only got one computer going against this, you're crazy. They probably have 10. And we've made it very difficult for individuals to remember their passwords. They're writing it down on Post-it notes, they're storing it in their desk, whatever, right? So we've started to train people to have bad habits because this is what we've told people to do for passwords. And I take some culpability for this as well. I'm one of the people who was telling people to do that. So what about this password? It's all lowercase. Is that a good password or a bad password? How long do you think it'd take a computer to break that password? It's very long. So in this particular case, there are 29 possible, I'm going to say 29 possible characters. We have a space, a comma, and a question mark, and then 26 lowercase letters. So we have 29, the alphabet is 29 characters in this password, but it's 41 characters long. Length matters. I don't even know what that number is. I don't have a clue. But it's a lot of days, right? So when we start talking about passwords, he's going to tell us. Let's go. So again, length is what matters. Complexity, it's when you're limited to 8 characters, when you have some database that can only store an 8-character password, complexity is the direction you have to go. Now that we're generally have a little bit more modern systems that can store very long passwords. The password, like at the bottom, which came first, the chicken or the egg, that's called a passphrase. And that's what we strongly recommend. You can come up with all kinds of passphrases that are very easy to remember. I mean, how difficult is that password to remember? And how much more difficult is it for a computer to break? However, the truth is, why is a hacker gonna brute force a password? There are other ways that are a little bit more efficient to do it, and one of them is a dictionary attack. And so most of your hackers, as they have gone through these have they cracked all these passwords, they've created dictionaries of the most common passwords. And I know people, there's a guy who works at Virginia Tech who actually does password cracking at a competition level. There are actually competitions for this stuff. Can you believe that? Talk about geeks. I'm a geek too, but his password dictionary, last time I asked, was many gigabytes. Huge dictionaries. It's just text. I mean, it's just words. But they're words that he's commonly seen as passwords in the past. And some of these are publicly available. And it's much faster if you just go based on commonly used passwords instead of going A, B, C. If you're just encrypting the commonly used passwords, you can speed up that process significantly. What's more, hackers use information that they know about you when they're trying to break into your password. And even if they don't know information about you, if they got it from some science fiction website is what they broke into, and they grabbed all the passwords for that science fiction website. You think Darth Vader might be one of the words they use as an example of something that somebody uses a password? Absolutely. And all the other characters, etc. They'll build some intelligence into what dictionaries they're going to apply. Makes it even more efficient, reduces the size of the dictionary, allows them to crack passwords even faster. On top of that, rainbow tables. Rainbow tables, we talked about this hashing, and you do A and then B and then C and then D. That's really expensive. It takes a lot of time. Once you've done it once, should you really have to do it again? Why not just store the hash of A and store the hash of B and store the hash of C, and next time you're trying to crack a different password database, just do a quick lookup instead of having to redo that entire hash. That's what a rainbow table is. And those lookups, thanks to computers, are really fast too. So, reusing passwords. How many people have a password on more than one site right now? I actually can put my hand down for this one. I'm proud of myself. Okay. Stop, please. We were talking earlier about a product called LastPass. I can't right now recommend that you use LastPass for work passwords, but certainly for personal passwords, for Facebook and LinkedIn and et cetera. There are products like LastPass, 1Password, KeyPass. There are all kinds of products that can help you store passwords, generate 25-character random strings for passwords. And it goes beyond passwords. It goes beyond passwords. You should even have your security questions answered this way too. My mother's maiden name, I have no idea what that is on any website that I've ever filled it out in. I don't have a clue. I generated a 25-character random string, that's my mother's maiden name. Keep it in a password database, and then you don't have to worry about someone finding out who your mother is and getting your password reset for you. So, websites are compromised all the time. We don't know when they're compromised. Sometimes we find out about it after the fact. Sometimes we find out about it weeks after, or weeks later. Sometimes we find out about it years later. So if you can't do unique passwords on each site, at least do unique passwords based on the type of information that's on that site. Make sure your banks have a different set of passwords than Facebook and LinkedIn, et cetera. And one thing that people don't necessarily think about a whole lot, they would classify email with Facebook and LinkedIn, not with banks and et cetera. The problem is that your banks are generally tied to your email account. If someone breaks into your email account and then goes to the bank and says reset password, what will it often do? Send you an email with a link to get a new password. So your email is the highest class of data that you leverage that email to access. It's not just the email messages that are sitting in it right now. Once compromised, always compromised. So I was talking earlier about the crackers and the hackers and all that. And I have witnessed crackers crack a password and then come back a month later and take variations of that password, add exclamation points to the beginning and end, change O's to zeros, et cetera. So they take a password that they've known has been used in that account, and then they turn around and they try to figure out how they might have changed it. And the reason that they do that is because we're humans. And humans tend to reuse. They do what they know. And so they may not be able to remember a new password if they just generate a generic brand new password. So, moving on past passwords. That's enough about passwords, but please be smart about the way you're using your passwords. And this is going to be really quick because I think I have 2 minutes. Data on devices. And actually this will be quick because Elon has a pretty good handle on the way that we're thinking about mobile devices and mobile data. It is time to rethink what we're protecting. I think Elon is ahead of the game in this compared to other universities. But let's talk about what happens when you lose a device. To replace an iPad, this is an iPad Pro. I just looked up the price today. Very top of the line, it's $1,079. To replace a top of the line MacBook Pro, $3,500. So you lose your device, that's how much you're out. What about the data? If your machine isn't encrypted and you have sensitive data on your system, what if it's data that you've done for research, et cetera? You could be in trouble in a hurry because you may have to recreate that data from scratch if you don't have good backups. What if you had your tax returns for you and your 2 kids on your computer? Well, now we're talking about $1,487 a person. If you, your wife, 2 kids, that's $6,000. That's more than the cost of replacing the computer at this point. And from a university perspective, what's the cost to notify individuals if you had university data, sensitive university data, and we're required to notify? Immediate cost, first year cost is $147 per person. Over 3 years, it's over $200 per person. It doesn't take very many pieces of information to get lost before we're talking about real money. It's not the computer that we care about, folks. It's not the iPad that we care about. It's not your iPhone that we care about. Those get lost, we can replace those at relatively modest costs. I'm not saying go throw it in the river so you can get a brand new one, but we can replace them at fairly modest costs. It's the data that those machines have access to, not even necessarily the data that's on them, the data to which they have access. That's the problem. Social media. Very quickly, be careful what you put on social media. Somebody in February 2015, put a nice post on Facebook about all this jewelry that they inherited. They were robbed 3 days later, and as the people were robbing them, they said, well, we found this on Facebook. Not smart. Be very careful what you're posting on Facebook. Even the selfies that you take, if you have a really expensive vase behind you, people are watching, people are paying attention. In 2010, this was another article I found, that burglars were literally picking houses based on public Facebook posts. Going through Facebook posts that are in the area, picking houses based on what they saw in the pictures. This isn't social media, but I also want you to think about what you're doing when you're setting vacation messages, either on your phones or on email. How many people send an email, "I'm out of the office today"? I don't. I might be forced to here, but I don't. And because I don't do that, because I don't want to tell anybody, "Hey, I'm not watching my account right now." It's just like putting a big, realtor sign in front of your house saying, "I'm not home for a week." Just don't do it. If there are people who you deal with on a regular basis and you need to make sure and let them know, then go ahead and let them know that you're going to be out. But don't post it in any kind of public forum. And if you're answering phones, don't say, "He's out this week," because for me, if I'm out this week, that means that I've got a son at home alone. I don't want people to know that. This is a good selfie, right? This actually came from Elon photos on Flickr. This is a good selfie. That's a bad selfie. Be careful what you put on Facebook. And last, from a social media standpoint, is Facebook is really well known for the go down the alphabet and answer these questions about yourself. Don't do that, please. If you read through these questions, and I know they're really small, who's your best friend? How many siblings do you have? Are you still in school? What school do you go to? Who do you live with? What's your hometown? Back when Sarah Palin was running for president, I think she was vice president actually. She was vice president under McCain. Her Yahoo account got hacked. Do you know how it got hacked? Her security questions to protect her password, to reset her password, were: what is your hometown? Who was your high school boyfriend? And what was your high school mascot? How many people knew that information about Sarah Palin when she was running for vice president? In the same way, oftentimes people advertise that information on social media. Be thinking about what it is that you're saying on social media when you're answering these questions. Thank you very much.